Exhausted by competing for years in his office, with overconfident rats and aimless donkeys, Bruno Kent goes for an interview, waiting for his turn, with skills, confidence, and a plan in his pocket. The receptionist calls for him to proceed to room number 13 and meet Ms. Irene Colombo. Miss Irene is waiting, well prepared to meet Bruno. Bruno starts walking, but first he goes to the toilet. There he takes out a small plastic container, extracts a green gooey object, and sticks it on his front teeth. Later, Bruno steps into the interview room and flashes the gooey object. Irene spots it, but chooses to ignore and greets him. Bruno behaves like he mixed up his psychiatrist's appointment with a job interview. Irene asks if he's feeling okay and immediately offers to reschedule the interview. Ignoring her questions, Bruno tells her something bizarre happened with him last night and he just can't stop thinking about it. Irene again politely offers to reschedule the interview to whenever he's feeling more composed. Bruno waves off the suggestion, saying it would be impolite. Bruno says he just needs to talk to someone about the weird mystery of last night. He promises not to take too much time. Irene asks him to keep it short, while stressing the fact about other candidates waiting for their turn. And then she just blurts out, "Be careful what you fish for." With these words of Irene, the game begins. Bruno tells Irene he spent 5 years in his last job. And since he was preparing for an interview, after ages he just couldn't fall asleep last night, and so he visited a bar near his place for having just one drink. But then he bumped into this friend, whom he had recently helped, to get a good job. The friend was desperate to show some gratitude, so they started talking. The drinks kept flowing, and they lost track of time. And right when the last drink was served, his friend just brought up some big problem with his family. Since Bruno didn't have the heart to abandon his friend in that vulnerable situation, they took his car and went to another bar. But strangely, the bartender from the previous bar was in this bar too. And he told them, no more drinks, the bar is closed. So they got in the car and reached another bar. But dear God, there once again, the same bartender was right in front of them. And even in this bar, he repeated the same words, only more louder than earlier. If the driving distance between the other bars was 5 to 10 minutes, then for the next bar, they drove the car for a good 15 to 20 minutes. But even in this far, far and away bar, the same nightmarish bartender was already present. Whether some deceased alcoholic's ghost was pursuing them, or some guardian angel was looking out for them, or a speedster, or a teleporter messing around, the mystery made their head spin. At this point, Irene asks Bruno if any of her colleagues or friends have paid Bruno to set this prank interview. She compliments Bruno for being an excellent storyteller, but calls his story quite lame. Bruno clarifies that he's not playing a prank, and he has no intention to offend her in any way. He mentions that someone in his professional circle had compared Irene with an octopus. Not just the head, but even the tentacles, each one have a brain of their own. And so he was hoping Irene would be able to solve the mystery quite easily. Irene feels a little dehydrated. The jigsaw pieces of Bruno's mystery start floating around in her mind. She asks Bruno if he was still in the car while waking up in the morning. Bruno says yes. His friend was in the car too. Making it look effortless, Irene begins to put together the pieces of Bruno's jigsaw. Before Bruno can utter another word, Irene finally cracks the mystery. Irene says he and his friend were so drunk they would come out of a bar, start the engine, but never put the gears. Their car never moved. They would keep chatting until one of them would look outside and notice the bar's sign. They repeatedly kept visiting the same bar and annoying the same bartender again and again and again. Bruno applauds to her response. However, now Irene states that her theory is absurd, but so is the idea of someone bringing up such a tale during a job interview. Bruno delightfully admits his story, the thing on his teeth, his behavior, everything was orchestrated. Then he reveals the truth. In the 5 years at his previous workplace, he loved his job. He always took initiatives and never lost focus from his responsibilities. Sickness, bad weather, family functions. He always gave priority to his work, and so before joining a new firm, he wanted to be sure that he would be working with decent and genuine people. So before Irene could conduct his interview, he had to conduct her interview, admittedly, in an unorthodox manner. He wanted to see how Irene, who is part of the upper management, reacts in an uncomfortable situation. Bruno tells her she never lost her cool. She displayed remarkable patience while truly listening to whatever he said and to whatever he did not. If she manages so much patience with a person whom she had just met, chances of her truly hearing him out as a subordinate are far better than his previous firm. And by crafting such an intricate interview, Bruno also proved he is not some average Joe who can't think outside the box. Now Irene asks Bruno, given his stellar resume filled with achievements, supplemented with excellent letters of recommendation from all previous employers, why did the last firm let him quit? Or is Bruno playing another game here to fetch a high-paying offer from her and bargain with his previous firm for a meaty raise there? Bruno responds, his previous firm didn't want to lose him. But for them, a horse is just another donkey to keep carrying more and more baggage for miles and miles. None of the top bosses had any vision. Over the years, Bruno had turned indispensable with the heavy lifting and micromanaging of daily tasks. His top bosses always had the same answer: soon, Bruno, but now is not the right time. They would only offer more money, but no growth. Fortunately, Bruno arranged for an experienced donkey, good enough to pass as a horse, got him hired, and escaped from there. Irene compliments Bruno for his wit and honesty and asks if now it's okay for her to conduct her part of the interview. She promises to be creative enough. Bruno requests her to proceed. Irene asks him to pick a day of the week, any day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, etc. Bruno says, done. Irene asks him to state his choice. Bruno counters, saying, usually in a magic show, the magician is supposed to read the participant's mind. Irene politely reminds him that he's part of her magic show now. Bruno mentions Sunday. Irene asks him to pick up the lamp close to them. Under the lamp, Bruno finds a paper which says, how did I know you were going to pick Sunday? Irene asks Bruno if he can explain her magic trick. Now, Bruno feels dehydrated. But as water rushes in, Bruno starts losing the one thing he needs the most: focus. He starts drowning in overthinking. Is he so ordinary that he gave the most obvious answer to Irene's question? If she already had the answer printed, that's what an average donkey is expected to answer, right? What if he's unable to solve Irene's puzzle after the trick he just pulled on her? Is it best to just walk away from there? Or should he gracefully accept his failure and respectfully move out? Bruno feels he's about to pass out, and his career is about to fade in darkness, lost in oblivion. Suddenly, Bruno feels if Irene whispered to him,
I shot the arrow first, and then drew the bull's eye.
A humbled Bruno breathes with relief and smiles, not knowing if Irene actually whispered anything to him. Bruno says, in case, you shot the arrow first, and then drew the bullseye around it. Then, probably, in this room, there are total 7 pieces of paper, including this one. Each piece carries a day of the week. I found Sunday under this lamp. So, Monday, probably, is under a cushion on the couch. Tuesday below the laptop, I guess. Wednesday in the cabinet next to you, and so on. Maybe not exactly in this order, but that's the trick, right? Irene tells Bruno he was strongly recommended by someone whose opinion matters a lot to her, and now she clearly sees why Bruno Kent would be the right fit in this firm. Bruno feels charged with horsepower, ready to race at full capacity. Irene asks Bruno to wait at the reception while she arranges for the irresistible offer, tailored specifically for him, along with a huge jump in the designation compared to his previous job. A few moments later, while waiting at the reception, Bruno casually chats with one of the receptionists. During the conversation, he tells the receptionist he is quite impressed with Irene and is thrilled to work under someone so intelligent. At this point, the receptionist, who is Irene's cousin, working as an intern there, reveals to him that he won't be working under or with Irene. If he's selected, then he's supposed to be Irene's replacement. Bruno is stunned. Further, the receptionist informs him about Irene handling her current post for years and her ongoing plans to move on. Since Irene's top boss trusts her, he asked her to get someone as good as her, as replacement, if she's to leave from here without burning any bridges. In the end, the receptionist tells Bruno, "You're right though, she is quite intelligent. And if she's selected you, then so are you." To which Bruno replies, "Well, or maybe I'm just another donkey."